Hi everyone, this is Stephanie. I go by StampJG here on YouTube and at my blog at stampjg.com. Thank you for joining me today as we take another look at Tim Holtz Shifters Stencils. In my previous video, I went into detailed explanation on the difference between the two sizes and how to use them. I will link it up here in the cards and down below in the description so that you can take a look at that video. Today I'm going to focus on 3 techniques that will allow you to create colorful backgrounds for your holiday cards, and if you change up the colors you can create backgrounds for any time of the year. Okay, for this technique I am going to focus on using 2 of the smaller stencils, the dots, shifter dots, and shifter stripes. And again, I will try to tilt these in the light. You can see it a little bit better with this one, how the plastic is etched with dots between the ones that are cut. This is what allows you to line up your stencil perfectly when you shift it over and can change colors very easily. So for this technique, we are going to start by masking off part of our card base. I'm working on a standard A2 size card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I want to protect the background, or the back of the card is what I want to do here. And so that will anchor the card to my base. I've made 2 little tiny marks on the side of my cardstock about halfway down where I'm going to place a mask. And I'm going to work on the top of my mask, the top of my card base first. I'm going to work on just the top half above this masking area, and I am going to put stenciled dots all the way over. And to start with, I am using Twisted Citron Distress Oxide ink. I like how this covers. And I'm just going to go ahead to my next color. In this case, I am using Candied Apple Distress Oxide ink. It's a pretty bright red. Okay, we're not shifting yet, but we are moving. I've got to move the stencil over so I can continue this pattern on the rest of the cardstock. To make things very simple for myself, I'm going to line up colors correctly. Okay. So there is the first round of my base. I'm going to go ahead and clean off the stencil so the next color I use won't get contaminated and get muddy on my cardstock, and I will be right back. Here is where the shift comes in. I am going to place the stencil down so that those dots that are already on my cardstock are lined up with these little etched dots, and this will protect them from any more ink going over them, but open up new areas that I can use to stencil through. This will allow me to add even another color or 2 to this background. Okay, now that I have this stencil down, I'm going to go in with Lucky Clover and do every other dot in this Distress Oxide ink color. And for a festive touch, I think I'm going to try one more color, and we're going to try mustard seed. Whoops, mustard seed. And there's the top half of my cardstock. I'm going to rinse off my stencil and we'll come back and do the bottom. When we go to do the bottom, I'm going to take off the mask and I am going to flip it around and line it up with the dots that I had previously created. With the tick marks I had previously created. And now I'm going to stencil the bottom half with the stripes. What I'm doing here at the very bottom, I am lining up the base of the stencil where the opening is. I'm lining this up completely with the bottom of the cardstock. Furthermore, I'm lining up this edge of the open stencil along the edge of my cardstock. So this way I know I'll have straight lines. So we're going to go in with Candy Apple Red Distress Oxide ink, and I am doing a kind of a pounce and twist motion so I don't distort the stencil, but it allows me to get ink blended onto the cardstock. And continue with the red. And I'm going to go rinse off my stencil and we'll come back for the shift. And you can kind of see, maybe just a little bit, between each of the open areas there are etchings with lines, and these are stripes. And I'm going to line up these etchings with the red that's already on the paper, the red stripes. This will leave an open area for me to put another color down. I'm going to go in with Distress Oxide ink and Twisted Citron. Now we have a one-layer background with dots on the top and stripes on the bottom. To turn this festive one-layer background into a card, I have stamped the sentiment from the Gina K Designs and ThermoWeb Stampin' Foil Holly Jolly set with Onyx Black ink onto a piece of white cardstock. I have backed it with a piece of textured foil paper from my local craft store. I have also cut a very small piece of this textured foil. I'm going to use this to cover the seam. Cardstock. And there we go, a fast, easy Christmas card. Using a one-layer background with multicolored dots and stripes created with Tim Holtz Shifter Stencils. The next technique, I am starting off with a piece of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white cardstock. I used Nina Solar White in 80 pound, and I am using the standard size, the larger of the two sizes, of Tim Holtz Shifter Stencils in stripes. I am going to lightly adhere my cardstock onto my craft mat, which is tape runner. I just need to steady it a little bit. I'm going to line up the base of my cardstock with the openings at the base of the stripes. And I'm also going to line up the edge of the cardstock with the edge of the stripe stencil. That way my stencil will be straight. So I'm going to start off with red, with Candy Apple Red Distress Oxide, and I'm going to use this as a finger dauber. This pounce and twist motion allows me to blend the ink into the paper and minimize some of the lines. Before I add my next color, you can see I've left 2 openings for color on this first section of background. I am going to go ahead and take this little tiny stamp set. This is a great technique for all the little tiny word stamp sets that you have. This happens to be the Christmas 3x4 clear stamp set by Simon Says Stamp. I've had this for a number of years. I believe it's still available, but again, any small stamp set with words on it, and there are bunches of them out on the market with sentiments on it. Now I am going to actually turn this cardstock sideways when I use it, but to stamp right now, I am going to go ahead and ink up my stamps and do it vertically. I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and this little tiny sentiment says, "Wishing you a." I'm gonna stamp it between those 2 lines. So now I'm going to go ahead and clean off my stencil and we'll come back for the shift. To make the shift happen, I am going to go ahead and line up these etched areas on the stencil with the red stripes that are already on my cardstock. Again, I want to line up the base tightly against the bottom, that way I know it's straight with the cardstock. And I'm just going to go ahead with my foam blending tool this time, and I'm just going to go ahead and add in my next color. And make sure I don't mess this up. We're going to move this over and finish our background. And there we have a colorful background with a sentiment already in it. Okay, to finish off this background, I am going to use a tiny snowflake stamp that I have and fill in this awkward little space. I am adding a die cut from the Gina K Designs and Thermoweb Holly Jolly foil mates. This was left over from my previous video where I ran all these through my laminator with foil, and this adds just a cute little touch. I'm going to start by taping off the back of it, and that will help anchor it to my to my base to keep it stable. And I'll be using Tim Holtz Shifters Stencil in the dots version, and I am using the larger size. The holes in this stencil are 3/8 of an inch wide. That means that if I wanted to use a alphabet stamp set with it, I could use anything 3/8 of an inch or smaller. And I actually happen to have a set in my stash. It is very well loved by Lawn Fawn. It is called Harold's ABCs. And these letters, even the capital letters, are large enough that I can stamp them through the stencil without any obstruction. And I'm going to use this to my advantage to create my next card. And I'm lining the dots up on the right hand side, on the left hand side, with just about the edge of the cardstock. Actually, let's start with stamping. I have already put the letters onto my block, and I'm going to use the word Mary. It's about the longest I can go. It's 6 letters long, and it'll just about fit across the bottom. Or, let's do not quite the bottom. I'm going to leave the Y until I move it over. And I am going to fill up the whole background. This is going to be a nice, simple background. And it goes pretty quick. Okay, now I want to add a touch of whimsy to this. So I am going to actually take a second color. I'm going to use Lucky Clover, and I'm just going to hit parts of those dots with this darker green. Since the ink on the paper is still wet, they will kind of mush into each other, kind of blend. Okay, to finish this first layer of stamping, I'm going to carefully lift this up and move it over. I will go clean off my stencil, and I will be back for the shift. Here is where we shift. I'm going to take the etched dots and line them up with the green dots that are already on my page. Coming back in and tapping in just a little bit of the candy apple over the worn lipstick. And this is just going to give me kind of a whimsical background. Okay, for the big reveal, here we have a multicolor background.